New act, same agents, completely overturned meta. The 4.04 patch notes came with a whole host of massive changes to the controller agents, and as a result, we're here now trying to figure out what the heck is going on with the agent meta as of Act 2. What is going on, ProGuides fam? It is your host Sergeant Frost, and today we'll be giving you our predictions on how the new agent meta will look heading into this new act. So let's jump right in and take a look at how different our tier list will look from the last. And since it's a new patch with some huge changes, we want to preface this by saying that this list is by no means perfect, and that the meta can shift in ways that none of us can fully predict. This tier list was written by one of our high radiant players, but of course, feel free to let us know if you feel like you have any differing opinions on how the meta currently looks in the comment section. Now, let's start a healthy discussion because man, this is the biggest meta shift in a long time. Let's start off with the S tier. With the controller meta getting turned on its head due to massive nerfs to Astra as well as some minor nerfs to Viper, much of the Sentinel controller hybrid class have taken a big hit in their power levels. So naturally, the agents that haven't been affected have risen up to take their place in the meta, and that means our knife-wielding duelist Jett is flying high this patch. But it's not only the fact that Jett has surprisingly not been nerfed this patch that makes her top of our tier list, but it's the fact that with the nerfs to Astra and Viper reducing the amount of Sentinel-like CC presence in the game, Jett and all the duelists are rejoicing at having less annoying things to deal with and more freedom to stamp their mark on the map. With that said, Jett was already a top S tier agent since the start of last year, and it looks like her reign of dominance is not ending anytime soon unless the devs decide to finally address her power level. So if you're looking to take your nutty aim and pair it with a perfect agent to frag out, then look no further than Jett to solve your problems. And by problems, I mean your enemies. And if you're looking to develop some of that crisp aim that sets the 30 and 10 Jett gods apart from the 2 and 19 insta-lock Jetts in my game, then make sure to download AimLab, the best free aim trainer around. Not only do they have nifty metrics to keep track of your progress and interesting insights on your aim that only a top tier coach will be able to notice, you also have the opportunity to test your abilities on any of the pro-created playlists available. So if you're trying to make the best out of this new act and click heads like a pro, then make sure to download AimLab today by clicking the link in the description. Sova is up next on our tier list to nobody's surprise, as anyone who plays a good amount of Valorant can clearly see just how necessary Sova is to any comp trying to win a game. Much like the past justifications for Jett, Sova's position is not challenged simply because the less utility Sova has to deal with, the more room for Sova to make his utility shine more and make life hard for the enemy team. His information gathering is top notch, and no one is really capable of matching his unique ability to generate information and get picks, and that is why he just feels irreplaceable on certain maps. But of course, the state of balance currently is surprisingly good in the sense that the other initiator agents also have a good foothold on the meta, which makes it so that even Sova is exceptionally useful in his own right. He has some decent replacements that won't make you cry if you end up lacking a Sova in your ranked games. Rising up to take his new rightful place in the S tier is Chamber, the newest Sentinel addition to the roster. Chamber is making waves in the ranked and professional meta as a top tier Sentinel duelist hybrid, capable of taking risky duels and pushing the issue confidently while also providing some solid defensive utility in the form of his trips and rotational teleports. He also solves the issue of attacker AWPing, because for the longest time, teams had to make the decision of having their Jett AWP and give up her entry prowess, or have her just stay with the rifle and become a smoke dash menace. Now, Chamber can just take her attacker AWPing considerations away while also providing for the team in the form of flank watch and aggressive playmaking. Even players like Hunter Thieves Asuna and TSM FTX Wardell have made the switch from Jett to Chamber, and it seems like Chamber's position in the meta is solidified as a very strong pick. Okay guys, so we're gonna have to cash in on our one super hot take token, because this new act is bringing in some crazy new changes, and we're in a festive mood now that Astra's kicked off of her controller throne. This will probably be the single biggest change we've ever made from tier list to tier list, but trust me when I say this, we might have stumbled into a parallel universe where Daddy Brimstone is the top dog. And before you guys go crazy and say, you guys must have a few screws loose to rank Brimstone up in S tier, hear me out. A team-wide speed boost paired with a weaker defensive utility meta plus the ability to instantly place up to 3 smokes at increased range? What this sounds like to me is an absolutely crazy set of factors that could literally make a rush 10 times more deadly. This along with the fact that Brimstone has post-plant lineups as well as a destructive ult to counter retake utility or stall time makes Brimstone really strong. To explain this more in detail, having strong attack side executes means that teams are more likely to play retake, which also means that post-plant abilities gain more value. Since Brimstone now has a kit that's very well suited for strong attack side executes as well as post-plant stall, his kit plays into itself by forcing defenders to play more retakes, which also makes Brimstone's post-plant stall even more valuable. Brimstone in his current state is the most complete agent he's ever been, and that means he might very well take the spot as the best smokes agent at the moment. Heading into the A tier, KO takes his place at the top, especially with how strong his kit has started to become as the community has embraced his suppression mechanic fully. When KO first came out, he was already a strong agent, but people didn't really know how to take advantage of his suppression and his flash was slightly undertuned. But now that people have found ways to capitalize on suppression as well as KO receiving buffs to his flashbang, he now has slowly crept his way up the rankings to find his place as a very solid initiator pick at the top of the A tier. Once a solid shoe-in for the S tier, Viper has had her abilities toned down a little bit with this new patch. And as a Viper main myself, I can definitely feel its impact on how I play around utility and control the map. None of the nerfs hit her too hard, as they just made her clunkier to play as well as made her fuel go down faster when the smoke and wall is up. But added together, they definitely make Viper feel a bit weaker than she was before. But of course, she's by no means out of the meta and that's why she's still sitting comfortably at the top half of A tier. These nerfs were definitely justified to some extent, but the fuel nerf definitely changes how you approach playing her now. Raze has steadily become the second or first pick for duelists ever since Chamber found his place at the top, as Raze has solid synergy with Chamber and has become the solution for teams needing a bit more utility to stall while also having some solid duelist capabilities. Raze's Boombot is still an awesome entry tool that gives you tons of free space, and her blast packs are also very versatile and can be used for all types of situations. That and her nade being great for controlling space or punishing enemies stuck in a chamber slow makes her stronger than ever. When we said the meta would be overturned, we meant exactly what we said. The meta is being overturned. Yoru's rework is finally in, and if you haven't seen all the Twitter clips flooding in with the many ways Yuru can outplay opponents now, you'll definitely get a better idea when you play against one or watch our upcoming Yuru guide detailing his newfound power. Yuru has evolved from his past shell of an agent to a solid duelist pick with how useful each of his abilities are by themselves, and how powerful they can be when put together. His gate crash now facilitates aggressive fighting since his teleport delay was slashed from 1.5 seconds to 0.5 seconds. His ultimate now hides him fully and lets him use abilities, and his decoy is now a real decoy that can actually punish enemies who are too trigger happy. All in all, Yoru's rework has definitely given him a much needed boost in power, and I'm excited to see just how crazy he can be in the hands of players like Tens, Ethos, and Red. At the same time, Omen has found himself revived into the A tier with some much needed buffs to his kit this patch. Although nothing is revolutionary in terms of his kit like Brimstone's was, Omen across the board was buffed, making his smokes faster with a lower cooldown, his shadow steps significantly faster, and his flash less likely to clip teammates next to you. There's not too much to be said about Omen that you don't already know most likely, but he's the strongest he's ever been and his shadow step is surprisingly good now to just escape a bad position. Since KO has surfaced as a new potential meta pick for second initiator, and he pairs well with agents like Killjoy, Skye has found herself second fiddle as an initiator pick on some maps. Although that's not to say she's weak by any means, Skye is falling slightly in the tier list as her flashes are no longer as oppressive as before. Her synergy is better with Cypher than with Killjoy, and she doesn't have as much stopping power as KO does right now with how strong suppression is proven to be. Anyways, it feels like I'm talking more about KO than about Skye. Skye is still a great agent in good hands, but she is starting to feel less valuable compared to KO and Sova. For our last pick in the A tier, we have Killjoy, the tried and true Sentinel agent that has become the standard for defensive utility. Most players are familiar with the power of a Killjoy, and she's been a part of the agent meta for as long as she's been out as an agent. Although she started to fall off over time from being the uncontested best Sentinel to being the generally preferred Sentinel, her value to a team is clear through flank watching capabilities and generally strong defensive setups. As a whole, she's still been the best defensively minded agent, although Chamber has taken her spot as the best Sentinel agent. Heading into the B tier, Cypher takes our first spot as a generally strong Sentinel pick that can easily tear apart an attacker team if they aren't prepared. He's not super useful outside of his defensive prowess, but his camera and trips allow him to keep tabs on parts of the map without having to be physically close. This gives him opportunities to make really strong lurks and gather deep information if he aggressively places his cam on attack and defense. As it stands, Killjoy is more preferred over Cypher in most cases, but Cypher is still a comparable pick for certain maps like Haven or Ascent. Sage is in an interesting position because while she does have generally useful utility for teams, she feels sort of out of place in a lot of situations compared to the other defensive agents like Killjoy and Cypher. While she has a great ultimate and her wall provides some unique strategies for teams, her overall usefulness relies more on her being close by, which is something that other Sentinels don't need to do. Similarly, with one of her most meta maps in Icebox being changed drastically this patch, it's hard to tell if Sage will still be a necessary pick as she once was. Many teams are starting to stray away from her now, and in my opinion, it chalks up to her being decent, but not special in a lot of situations. From an explosive debut to a similarly meteoric fall, Neon is quickly feeling like a flavor of the month agent that has lost its touch now that the dust has settled. When she first came out, people were super excited to see what a speedy Apex Legends-like agent could do to the Valorant meta, but it seems like she's not quite able to live up to her high-octane expectations. Not to mention, Brimstone's buffs now brings the speed to any agent on the team. Doubling down on that in the form of Neon feels somewhat redundant and unnecessary when you could have a Raze or Jet instead to breach a bomb site. Speaking of breaching a bomb site, Breach sits this patch at the bottom of B tier not because he lacks the power to dominate as an initiator, but because he's really a situational agent that can't really be pulled out on most maps. On maps like Fracture and Haven, he could be an absolute nightmare to face, allowing him to replace even Sova for the initiator spot. But on other maps, his abilities don't seem to shake up the sites enough to be worth fielding. So if you were to look only at maps like Fracture, he would be a shoo-in for the best initiator. But other than that, he's really hard to get along with. Landing in our C tier, many of you might be surprised to see Reyna play so low when she's such a menace to deal with in ranked games. But before you get your pitchforks and knives out to defend her, hear me out. With all the new changes in our meta that came from the controller shuffle as well as the rise of new duelists like Yuru and Raze at the top, one trend that we can notice is that every duelist has some sort of niche way of entering that makes their pathways smooth and efficient. Unfortunately for Reyna, she doesn't quite fall into that category, and even with additional utility being used to support her, she doesn't quite fit in as well as Jet or Raze can. If anything, you have good utility, why not double down on momentum by having Raze or Jet fly in with the support instead? Reyna is getting a little bit of that Phoenix treatment where she's not a bad duelist, but she's also not geared to fulfill a unique duelist role, which is what makes it hard to justify running her. Astra is down bad this patch, and I know we've all been here before when she got nerfed in episode 3. The community overreacted last time, but if I'm being perfectly honest, this time it feels like the nail in the coffin for sure. We could be overreacting again, but an across-the-board nerf to all of her abilities by significant amounts just feels like she's gonna be struggling big time to get anywhere close to the value she once had. And her stars also got decreased from 5 to 4. From the perspective of someone who has been playing quite a bit of Astra lately, she feels gutted as an agent because not only can she not recover her smokes quickly, she also can't freely take back her stars like before without opening up a lot of gaps with the cooldown. All in all, I think that with the big nerfs that she has received this patch, and the buffs that Omen and Brim have received, she's going to fall out of favor for a while unless some brave players reinvent her playstyle. And finally, at the bottom, Phoenix is sitting pretty being the lame duck of the Valorant cast, completely power creeped out of the meta. Once a top tier duelist at the start of the game's lifecycle, he's since fallen out of style as more and more specialized agents come out to take away his fire. He's not necessarily bad per se, like Yuru was before his rework, but he just can't compete with the other options and he feels like a side character while agents like Jet and Chamber steal the show. With that being said, Phoenix now lost to his old buddy Yuru and is chilling with the fallen star Astra in the C tier. And that concludes our Act 2 tier list. Let us know what you think and what your opinions are on the current agent meta and whether you like it or not. This has been your host Sergeant Frost, and good luck on the grind this act.